Hello, everybody. We want to welcome you to our Sabbath service. This is Lebanon Church Waukegan. This is Pastor Britzman. Tonight, we're going to be running Daniel timeline. We've been talking about prophecy. We got into chapter 11, got a little bit stuck a little bit, and I think we're working our way out of it. And we're going to run the timeline as we've been said, go through all the different things that we talked about, all the things that the book of Daniel have said, but we're going to put it in real live time on the timeline that we are working here. It is my intention to have a virtual timeline where we can put all the different information, all the different wars linked in the time in which they happen, so that we can have a visual study and a wordy study as the Bible and the history study behind it as you go forward. That is my main intention, even into Revelation as we go into it and do our studies. Whenever the Lord allows us to do that, we'll connect those timelines and continue it on out, even as the Bible had said. So we're just going to get into this thing tonight, tooth to toenails, and see what God says. All right, we talked about the three times that Gabriel mentioned to Daniel from the start of Daniel, even up until the point of chapter 11. Daniel mentioned the main time was 2,300 days. You had 70 weeks and 69 days. All that's going to happen within the 23 days. Okay. We also gave it a starting point. We said when the decree was made for Israel to go back and to build the temple was 457 BC. So that's when that time started for each one of those times. The 2,360 days, the 70 weeks, and the 69 weeks all started at the same time. Now, in fact, the 70 weeks and the 69 weeks are all part of the same, and it's all part of the 2,360 days or 3,260 years. We also learned about Bible prophecy. There's a day for a year. Okay, well, Daniel, when he first started the book of Daniel, Daniel was not necessarily given prophecy, but dealing with the prophecies that was happening between Babylon and Nebuchadnezzar and Nebuchadnezzar's son, Belshazzar. And Daniel started off by interpreting what they saw, what they dreamed, and what they happened. Somewhere in the middle of Daniel, Daniel began to have dreams and a vision about what's going to happen. Primarily, Daniel saw in his first vision four great beasts, or four great beasts that's coming up out of the sea or out of the land, and that would be the lion, the bear, the leopard, and the dragon. So when you're dealing with the prophecy of Daniel, he never really gets out of those four beasts. He kind of explains the beasts as they go forth. Sometime in the book of Daniel, because there's many prophecies out there, we tend to want to give all the information in Daniel, but the Bible kind of seal certain information at a certain time. And it usually what I found through all of my studies is dealing with the beast, but primarily those who's really affecting the land of Israel is what he's highlighting throughout the Bible. Because he told Daniel at one point, I'm going to show you what's going to happen to your people in the latter days. And his people will be Israel. So it's all these little words and all these little things that I had to go back to the basis to pick up to bring all these things in the timeline. Okay. The Bible also talks about two horns. Okay. And I really didn't realize that until we found out the little horn that came out of Grisha. So you know, had a little horn that was going to come out of the dragon, but he's going to come up among the 10 kings. So that's one horn. But you also had a horn what's going to come out of the division of Greece, and that's another horn. So just go back to the brass tacks for everything. We understand that when we got our official timeline here, we understood that that 457 BC was going to be where Artaxerxes makes the decree. But God gave Jeremiah a timeline for Israel. That timeline started in 590 BC, and what God told them that Nebuchadnezzar was going to come and he was going to capture Israel and take it to Babylon. So let me talk a little bit about how Nebuchadnezzar did it. In order for Nebuchadnezzar to go and take out Israel, he had to take out Egypt first. So he took out Egypt, and he moved up to Israel, and they captured Jerusalem, and they captured Jerusalem. And so to make you understand this here, the first thing that Babylon did was took out what we would consider as the king of the south, and he went up to Israel and captured Jerusalem, and he took Daniel back into captivity. Okay, so we understand after Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar took them. Belshazzar, which is his son, took over, and then he began to reign. He made God upset. He used the gold. He sacrificed to idols, and God put his finger on the wall. And that night, you see Darius the Mede come in, and then they take out Babylon. But now the Medes and the Persians was together, and Cyrus was the main king, and Darius the Mede was considered it. Some people consider that's his son, but he placed them over the realm of Babylon. So the Medes had already begun to conquer territory, but Babylon did not get conquered till 539 BC. Period. Okay. Then you had Cyrus the king. So the line of succession would not follow the Medes Empire, but the Persian Empire. So you had Cyrus the Varus, you have Artaxerxes I. You had a little king before Artaxerxes, but he didn't make that significant of a change. And then you had Artaxerxes himself, who made the decree. Well, the Bible said that Xerxes I was going to stir up the realm of Grecia. And then that takes us up into Grecia, because Grecia began to fight with the Babylon king here. So those are the three kings. The decree was made 457 AD. Now Israel himself is going into the promised land. What we sometimes don't do, or sometimes we didn't do, is we didn't follow the line of succession or how this impact Israel, because God is talking to Daniel precisely about what's going to happen to Israel. Because remember, when Daniel did that long prayer, he knew Israel was coming out of that 7 years of bondage. And then now God is showing him that some certain things was going to become of Israel. And God said, I'm going to show you what's going to happen to them in the latter days here. The rough goat is the king of Grecia, and the horn between his eyes is the first king. So we understand that as Xerxes I stirred up the realm of Grecia, there began a lot of infighting between the Medes and the Grecian Empire. So Alexander the Great comes in, he invades the Median Empire, and now Grecia is becoming one of the superpower. And so then he said, when Alexander the Great come in, there been broken, there stood up for it, four kingdom shall stand up out of the nation. So you're going to have four of Alexander the Great generals stand up out of the nation. This is what you're looking at on our timeline. We put it together even as the Bible said. You had Alexander the Great being the four kings. Alexander the Great drunk himself to death. And then you had Ptolemies, Celestials, Saluter. All these people stand up out of the kingdom. Eventually the kingdom was get down to a point where there was two, because there's a lot of infighting between the Grecian Empire, and then you would have the Ptolemaic regime, and you would have Seleucus regime, and that would be the king of the south and what we considered as the king of the north, because you had Israel in between. Well, the Bible also talk about the 2,320 days was going to be the length of what Daniel was saying. That was a biblical, that was a date or a prophetic date that God was saying, when all this is said and done, something is going to happen at that date. Well, it will start in 457 BC. As I said before, all the dates starts there. It would end in 1844. That's when Jesus made a judgment in the favor of the saints. So now most of everything that we're going to talk about is going to happen within that time, and Daniel don't necessarily give you great detail to fill out that time. And so now we're looking to see what he told Daniel what's going to become of his people. And that's one of the things that when I went back and read and studied, and I began to look at what happened to Israel, a lot of this here opened up in a great and better way, and my timeline was expanded to a way that I felt pretty good about it. Now, the other time is the 70 weeks. That was included in that. Started at 457 BC again. The 70 weeks end at 34 AD. What is the significance of 34 AD? That is the time when the message of God went out to the Gentile. In other words, Christ was letting Daniel know what's going to be happen for your people. So he stopped uh, at the house, his house, and now because he was preaching for those 3.5 years to Jerusalem, and now God is going out to reclaim his lost people throughout the world. Not necessarily just Israel, but his peoples that were scattered abroad, even as Jesus Christ said when he was here. All right. Now, the 69 weeks is still part of the 70 weeks. It's still part of the 2,300 days or the 2,300 years. It's the same thing. They have the same starting point. But what Jesus is simply doing, he's breaking it up because he wants you to know that something's going to happen within 69 of the 70 weeks. And what it is this right here. We broke all the math down. We end up coming up with these dates. That's 457 BC. That is the Artaxerxes decree for the temple to be built. And then the end of the 69 weeks, if you take the days, you end up being 483 days. You add the day of 0, you come out to 27. 27 BC. What happened at 27 BC? Christ is on earth, being baptized, getting ready to take his ministry forward here. Now that Lord that we love, that have been talking behind the cloud, have suddenly showed on what earth. Okay, so he said 70 weeks were determined. He said in 69 weeks, I'm going to be receiving the baptized. The Holy Ghost fell on him like a dove, and there he was being baptized, even of John. John said, suffer it not to be so. I am worthy to be baptized of you. Jesus said, for the scripture to be fulfilled, this must be so. That's what Jesus was talking about. He was baptized, and straight away he came up out of Jordan and went into his ministry. Then Jesus said, in 1 week. So if you take 69 weeks and add another week, you have 70 weeks. This is all the Bible is saying. So what happened in this 1 week? He said, confirm the covenant with 1 week. He's going to confirm the covenant with 1 week. What is the covenant? A covenant is a promise or a contract that God made with Israel. So now that last week left, he's going to be confirming his promise to Israel. Okay. Now the promise was not to Abraham and the seed, but the promise was that Christ. So Christ had to come here. He had to die in order for this testimony of the Old Testament and the New Testament to be solidified. Blood had to be offered. So now you're about to see in the middle of the week, the sacrifice is coming. He's going to make the daily sacrifice cease and the oblation cease by his death. And that, my friend, in the middle of the week is 31 BC. Christ died upon the cross, gave his life, and now we all have an opportunity to go home. So that's the middle of the week. Well, we still got another part of the week left. Okay, as I said before, there he is, Christ on the cross. Luke 23, 33 to 34 tell you this is what Jesus did. He went to the place of Calvary. He gave us life for us, and that's it. So the book of Daniel give us a lot of great thing to look at. Okay, now he said this here in the other one end of the week here. It would take us to 34 AD. So now that'll conclude your 70 weeks. Okay, you have 69 plus 1 week, and then you break that week in half. In the middle of the week, Christ died. Okay, 3 days he risen from the grave. He preached for 40 days, and he ascended before the Father. And he told his disciples to go and wait. He was going to send them a comforter, and they was to go to Jerusalem and wait. And the great day of Pentecost, the Holy Ghost rusted in, and now Peter and Paul, them there, and his regime is filled with the Holy Ghost, and they began to speak with tongues, and everybody who was there heard them speaking in their own tongue. It was an amazing day. Okay, then what would happen in these last 3 or 4 weeks, or 3 or 4 middle of the week? What would happen is that God would be so generous that he would give the Jewish people more time. And now the disciples is going through the house of God, preaching to the Israelites. But around about 3400 AD, Paul got blinded, and now the message of Paul is gone into the world. And so Jesus wanted to make a point of that. He separated that out. He wanted you to know, Daniel to know that he was going to be there. All this is still happening within that timeline, but he specifically showed Daniel this time, showed Daniel his death, showed Daniel when he was going to come to earth, when he was going to be baptized, when he's going to die, and all between us here. If we looking at what's happening in Israel, it would make a lot of sense. Daniel was not concerned about the world, but he was concerned about his people. Again, the three kings of Persia, and the fourth king, that'll be Darius, Cyrus, Darius. That was another a king before that. Xerxes would be the fourth, and then he stirred up the realm of Greece because he was the rich one. His son Xerxes made the final decree for Israel to go and to build the city of Jerusalem again. Now, I'm going to say this here about the Babylon, the Persian kingdom and the Babylonian kingdom. They really didn't abuse Israel or do Israel dirty as much as the other two kingdom coming behind us here. I mean, Babylon really wasn't that bad to Israel at all. You know, Babylon got in trouble because of pride. Belshazzar got in trouble because he was just stupid. Okay, but now when you get into Grecia, you're going to begin to see he's going to show him what's going to happen in the latter days here. So just to recap here, let's go back down to it. In 27 AD, you had Christ was born on earth. The Roman Empire was the fourth beast was in full power control there. Okay, so on 27 BC, you're going to have between 27 BC, the rise of the Roman Empire. You're going to have the birth of Christ, which is around about 4 BC. So let me explain something to you happened here, because when we get into the book of Revelation, a lot of this stuff from the paper power is going to be filled in there. It's not necessarily really a lot of this stuff is necessarily really filled in the time of Daniel. Daniel understood what was going to happen, but he kind of focused on what was going to be happening to Israel throughout those times. Okay, so we said by 4 BC Christ was born on earth. So what was so significant about 4 BC? Well, Christ on earth told Rachel she was going to be mourning for her children and she was not going to be comforted. And Christ told her that was going to happen. Also, the prophet Isaiah told her that too. And so what happened? Rachel mourned for a kid. King Herod, which was not a legitimate, shouldn't have been a legitimate king of Jerusalem anyway, who was put there by the Roman Empire to be his puppet, he made a decree that all the babies around there be killed. By 27 AD, the decree fell. Christ still was born. Christ being baptized. 31 AD again, Christ baptized. 34 AD, we went to the Gentiles, and Paul and them is now preaching to what we consider as the Asia Minor, Turkey, Jewry. In other words, they started from the south and began to work their way on down, preaching the gospel of Christ here. So understand how significant it is. We said by 476 AD, the Roman Empire was wrapping itself up, leading ourselves to go into the paper power. So let's go on. We understood that when Daniel specifically talked, he told him that the Persians was going to be taken over by Greece, and he said, "I'm going to tell you what's going to happen in the latter days for our peoples." And so we know Israel was going to suffer even greatly before then. And what Daniel was so complex about, he just assumed because of the 70 years of Babylon captivity, Israel will finally be free. And Israel was free and was able to go back and build that temple, but they was attacked very greatly for that. Not necessarily that they was doing anything to avoid that attack, but this is what happened. Now, I want you to see this here. Therefore, the he-goat waxed very great, and when he was strong, the great horn was what broken. That's Alexander the Great. And for it came up 4 notable ones toward the 4 winds of heaven. So we understand that their empire was going to be broken. I showed it to you there when it was broken. The 4 generals take it. Now listen what he said. And out of one of them came a little horn. Now, who was he talking about? So out of one of these 4 that's going to take Alexander's place is going to come a little horn. This is the horn here that's going to eventually persecute God's people. Remember, I'm going to show you what's going to happen in the latter days to your what people. This is one of the things that I missed so greatly by understanding this here, because I was trying to put the paper power and everybody included in here, but that's just not what God is. He's going to start with this little horn here. Okay, so this little horn that's going to come out there, which waxed exceedingly great towards the south, towards the east, and towards the what pleasant land. And it waxed great, even to the host of heaven, and it cast down some of the stars, turned the host of the stars to the what ground, and stomped on them. So how did he cast the host of the grounds and stomped on them? The host of the what? Some of the hosts and the stars of the ground and stomped on them. Well, if we're talking about uh, any of these beasts outside of the Persian and the Babylonian Empire, both of them is going to have part in casting down the host of heaven and stomping on them. We understand one of the hosts of heaven, two of the hosts of heaven, at least, was dealt with in a time of wrong. We know John the Baptist, the stars, was killed, and Christ. Who are these? These are religious figures. So these stars are going to be cast down. We're going to understand in Grecia, they're going to be cast down too. All right. So we do understand that eventually the Persian Empire goes out again. Alexander the Great become the four kings, just like he said. He said four was going to stand up for him. Alexander the first king. You had Ptolemy. Here's the four kings standing up all the way to the Seleucid Empire. So Ptolemy and Seleucus is going to be the last of the two kings when it breaks down to the final Emperor Balab. And then you're going to see out of Alexander the Great, also still being the first king, it broken into part. You're going to see Ptolemy here and the Seleucid downer. They're going to come into it here together here. And out of that Seleucid Empire, a little horn is going to come out. That's Antiochus IV. He's going to come out, and he is going to be the one who deal with God people unwisely here. So now, again, we talked about the king of the north and the king of the south. This is relative to Israel. Israel being that era with that line drew across, okay, it represents the king of the north or the king of the south. Now, if we're talking about the king of the south, we're talking about Egypt because it is south of Israel. Again, if we're talking about the king of the north, we're talking about Syria or that reign of Syria or that Seleucus Empire, and it is what north of Israel. So whoever was the controlling factor in this here ordeal was really what he was talking about, the king of the north or the king of the south. And so, but we're looking at what he is trying to say here. Now, we understand that little horn gonna come here, say, yea, he shall magnify himself over even over the prince of the hosts. Now, this is what he gonna do. And by him the daily sacrifice shall be what? Taken away. Okay? And the place of the sanctuary shall be what? Cast down. Okay? And the host shall be given him against the daily sacrifice by the reason of transgression, and it cast down the truth to the ground and practice and what prosper. Now that little horn, he have to be able to do all these things that he's saying. Okay, now we understand that Christ hadn't died yet in the problem of Grecia. So there was the high priest was still making sacrifices. It's all about common sense, right? After Jesus died, it doesn't even matter because the sacrifices, all that has stopped, because now we are not to come to Jesus with blood and lamb because the blood is already shed. So we must understand that this had to happen before Christ was born. It can't be Rome because Rome tore up the temple and sacrificed a pig after the death of Christ, not before. That happened in 70 AD, after 70 years after Christ had been crucified. So that happened in, like I say, 70 AD. But now this little horn here is Grecia, who's getting ready to persecute God's people. So let's look at it here. All right, Daniel 11:28. And he turned unto his own land with great riches, and his heart was against the holy covenant, and he shall do exploit and return to his own land. All right, now we understand that we have Ptolemy and the Seleucid Empire going here. We have the little horn coming here. So what happened here? Well, I'm gonna go back a little bit, and then we're gonna pull some peoples in here to bring this here along. We understand that eventually, and Antigonus 5, if I'm saying it right, if I'm not, just forgive me. He's gonna sacrifice a pig in the temple. He's going to close down the temple. He's going to set up the god of Zeus. He's going to prohibit the Sabbath, the feast days, the custom. He's going to even stop people from being what? Circumcised. Okay? He's going to plunge the temple treasury, and he's going to leave troops to carry out a reign of terror behind him, period. He's going to do all that. But let's look at what's going to lead us up to this here. Okay. Now we have Ptolemy, and we're going to have solutions that's going to be fighting. But this thing started with Antigonus III. He was the Antigonus Great, if I'm saying it right. And then you had Ptolemy V. Okay. Now he went down to Ptolemy, and they was engaged into a war, and that's him going back to his land and things like that. And so he was able to conquer him, but he didn't take him out. But anyway, they made an agreement. And within that agreement, what he did was he gave Ptolemy his daughter Cleopatra, and for marriage. So that is, in those days it was custom, if you were going to build an alliance with another regime, they would sometimes use their daughters as a marriage as a sign of faith. But what Antigonus wanted was his daughter to manipulate this man to a point where she could control him, and that Antigonus would always have him on the part. But Cleopatra, she double-crossed him, and she went and she made a legion with what? Rome. And after this, Antigonus got so upset, he began to make war with Rome. And Rome pretty much dominated him. Rome pretty much beat him. And after he lost the war, Rome made them pay them a lot of money. They had to go pay a dowry. So now Antigonus goes back to try to raise his dowry. He goes in the temple of Baal to try to raise the temple so he can raise money to pay off his debt, and he died in the temple of Baal. Well, at that time, okay, his son Seleucus IV came to power. Okay, Seleucus IV sent his general down to go and to fight with Ptolemy V here. And I'm sorry, sent his general to go into what? Jerusalem. And what he wanted him to do was to raid the temple of Jerusalem. There was a priest at that time named Ananias, and what they did was they fought and they stopped him for going into that temple or whatever. So he goes back and eventually tells Seleucus that a supernatural power prevented him from going into that temple and stealing the treasure. Well, as history will tell you, that his general turned on him and murdered him. Meanwhile, Antigonus had another son, Demetrius, but when he messed up with the Roman Empire, as a sign of good faith, he made Demetrius go down to be a hostage here until he paid all his debt, or however that went. But now he was over in Rome when his brother died. So now he was the rightful heir to that throne. So now you're going to see Antigonus IV comes in with flattery. Okay, and then he begins to go up and convince the peoples that he should be the next heir until his how you say, cousin or nephew Seleucus, Demetrius, come back into the what? Throne here. So what happened was, as he gained the throne, he did not relinquish the throne. Now, between the other two previous Antigonus V, his son Seleucus IV, they had already been working on paying down the debt to the point by the time Antigonus IV came down here, he had money to spend. So now he's going to go back now and fight with what? The Roman Empire. Okay? With the Egyptians, right? He's going down to take out the what? Egyptians here, which was Ptolemy's six there. And so what happened is that he goes and he tells him, his brother, excuse me one second here. He goes to Rome and remind them of the legion that it was made by him and Cleopatra here. And Rome began to come to protect him. So Rome sent a senator down called Papilius. Papilius goes and he draws a line in the sand and say, hey, we got a treaty with these Egyptians and you can't be going down there and mess with them. And so he drew a line in the sand and he told this man that you can't go down there, and he wanted an answer. So he drew a circle around him and said, make no mistake about it. If I don't get an answer today, that is a declaration of war with Rome. And he did not want to fight with Rome because he knew what Rome did with Antiquities III. So Roman power back then, they really didn't notice. They was already the dominating factor right there. Though they might have the king of the north and the king of the south fighting, whatever Rome was saying at that point in time goes. So the Roman senators draw a line in the sand, and then, he goes back. Now he's upset. Now as he goes back, he goes into Jerusalem. And this is where Antiochus is going to commit all these foul acts and things like that. After Antiochus, there's going to be two more of the king. Demetrius is going to finally get up out of Egypt. He's going to kill the king, and eventually he becomes a king after Antiochus 5. So let's take a look at what he's going to do here on our timeline here. That's the little horn that came in, that that's what's going to befall that people. For what's going to be broken, the little horn going to come. He comes in. Then you see he goes after Papilios, the Roman senator, drew the line in the sand. He gets upset. His pride is hurt. He took his whole army down there, and he was stopped by a small army with this here senator that wasn't even in military gear. So as being embarrassed, so he goes to Jerusalem, and he goes with a fury, and he goes against the covenant. That's when he goes in. He's going to shut down the temple. He's going to set up the abomination of Megadeshin with the god of Zeus. He's going to stop them from worshiping him on Saturday, the Sabbath, prohibit the Sabbath, the festival, and all the customs, even the circumcision. And then he's going to sacrifice a pig in God's temple. And then he's going to take all the treasure and gold. And this man left behind troops to finish up his work in Jerusalem. And this is what Daniel was saying. This is what Daniel was looking at, what was coming up on Israel at that point in time here. Okay, now you have to understand that now Jerusalem is divided into four parts. Now that the Jewish people was in captivity, a lot of them went into what is considered as, they started acting like Greeks. And then you had one who wanted to continue the Orthodox Jews custom here. That was the Hellenistic group and the Hasmoneans, if I'm saying it right. Well, the Hellenistic group of those Jews they started acting like how do you say? They started acting like Greek peoples, or they say Christian peoples. Well, by that time, Christianity wasn't really taken off into its thing. But in other words, they start influencing or going into the Greek culture. They denied their own culture and they began to go into that. Remember, he said that some of the people are going to be driven away and they're going to be doing things that they shouldn't. Then you're going to have a group of people that's going to stand there and do it. And this is where you're going to come in with the Maccabees revolt. And all this is going to come in here. So let's go back up to it. Okay, we said about 168 BC, roughly. That could be now. All right, Jerusalem, okay, was under siege. Okay, what that did was, that separated, that broke the covenant of God, because they're going to do one or two things here to do it. Okay, the Hellenistic group would be the Sadducees. They will be the group of people that when Jesus was talking about was the Sadducees, and the Sadducees would be the people that kept the Orthodox Jewish religion. Well, they had a high priest there. This is a high priest. His name was Onias III. Onias III was a son of the Levite. He was part of the Levite tribe. He was a good high priest. He also had a brother named Jason. What Jason did, he goes over there to Antiochus, and he tells Antiochus, if you choose me over my brother Ananias, I would help you convert the Jewish peoples into the culture of the Greeks. We will make you more Greek, and we will help you get rid of this pested Jewish religion. And so what happened was, he agreed to do it. And so now Ananias, the high priest, was no longer high priest, and you had Jason. So I put Jason in red over here on the Hellenistic side, because he was one of the first priests to do it. But now Ananias didn't fight it too much, because according to the Jewish custom, you had to be a Levite to have that post. Well, what will happen then is that later on, uh, Jason wasn't making this happen fast enough. And so what are you going to do? He's going to choose his, Antichus is going to choose another high priest that wasn't of the Levite lineage. And his name was Menelaus. Now, Menelaus was more ruthless than Jason's. So now he did this here before he went to Egypt. But Ananias, when he went down to Egypt to fight, he took Menelaus out and put Jason back on the throne. Open revolt. But when he came back and found out that Ananias had went against his rule, he put Menelaus back on the throne, and that's when he went in the temple and did all his low down dirty work so he can prove to them who he was and who was the man. Well, this all led down to the Maccabee revolt. What happened is the Jewish people revolt with it, and to get down to this one particular Judah's Maccabees. Judah Maccabees started fighting and revolting against this empire here, and it goes all the way, and this keep going all the way down, even to the time of Rome. His brother, his brother took his place, and what they was doing, they was trying to get Jewish independence from the Greek. They was trying to fight back, and that's when the Bible said that they was helping with a little help. That was that. All this is mostly focused on that part of it. Now, okay, let's go into Daniel 7 again. Now, Daniel also said this. After this, I saw in the night vision, and behold, a fourth beast, dreadful and trouble, strong exceedingly, and it had what? Great iron teeth, and devoured and broke into pieces, and stomped the residue of his feet. And it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, and it had what? 10 horns. Now, the Bible really doesn't talk about the 10 horns. It don't. But if you notice that Rome was already there, Rome was always there. We just didn't recognize that most of behind all this here stuff was going on. Rome was rising to what power here? They had most of the power. Okay, all right. So you had the Maccabees revolt. Eventually, you had a person, and it was successful for a while until Simon the high priest, who they call Simon priest forever. He somehow got a semi-independent. He goes to Rome. He make a declaration to Rome to acknowledge him, and he goes back. But here's what they did when they established Samson. Samson the high priest over here. However we say it, he was not just the high priest, but he was a king priest. The problem with that is, in Jewish custom, you couldn't be the priest and the king at the same time. It was not allowed in the Jewish law. So he would go, so now you're going to see that the Maccabees broke is going to go backwards again, because here goes Simon doing all this stuff that he shouldn't do. Okay, while this is going on, Rome is still rising to power here. So you're going to have Pompey, Caesar, and you're going to have Julius Caesar, and you're going to have Crassus. All these people are going to run to the power. And Rome was still trying to build up a republic around this. All this here revolt and stuff was happening. And so eventually, Julius Caesar will go out, and he will conquer the rest of the western part of that Pompey and them hadn't conquered, because they hadn't made a deal. What he was going to run into, he's going to run into the people like the Franks, the Brits, the Hurley. Well, those are all the line of the 10 kings. That's Julius Caesar bringing the 10 kings into this here picture here. Eventually, he gave his daughter to Pompey. Pompey, she passed away. Pompey go crazy. Crassus, he get killed because he was so greedy. And then you had Julius Caesar and Pompey here, and eventually Pompey get taken out, and you only had what? Julius Caesar. So Julius Caesar finished. He dies. Okay, that end that trifecta done. But then Octavius, which was his nephew, who became his son because he's a doctor, then he begins to get with Mark Antony, and this other general, and they make a try first to take out the people who killed Caesar. Eventually, Lupadors, or however you said, he decided that he no longer wanted to do this no more. And so you have Octavius, who's later on going to be Augustus Caesar, and you're going to have Mark Antony. And what's going to happen there is that Mark Antony and Cleopatra is going to kill themselves, and now Octavius is going to be unchecked in rule in Rome, and that is 27 BC here. Okay, and you will find in the Bible at the time of Christ, Augustus Caesar, who was Octavius, was on that throne, just like Christ said it is. But what I'm trying to say, from the time that Antigonus III went into that temple, the Jewish faith, okay, took a heavy blow, and you had people who was no longer using the Jewish custom, and now we have a problem on great proportion. Now he said, and the king shall do according to his will, and shall exalt himself and magnify himself above God, every God, and speak marvelous things against the God of God, and shall prosper until the end of the nation is what complete. For that is determined shall be what done. Neither shall he regard the God of his father, nor the desire of women, nor regard any gods, for he shall magnify himself above all. We talked about this basically in the scripture where the paper power came and done a lot of this stuff that we're talking about here. But in his state, he shall honor the God of forces, and the God whom his father knew not shall he honor with what gold, with silver, with precious stone, and with precious things. And then they shall, those shall he do in the most strange hope with strange gods, whom he shall acknowledge and increase with what glory, and he shall cause them to rule over many, and shall divide the land for what gain. Now, I really believe this empire coming here, these people coming here, was the first part of the 10 kings coming up. I don't necessarily think that was all the paper power, but what the paper power was able to do on the time of the rise of the 10 kings, well, he was able to get that first kingdom of France to back him. That first kingdom of France backed him is where they killed those 3 kings. And I believe that is the king. Now, I believe the paper power is on the rise behind this here, but I believe it's that particular king that done this. Because at that time, the paper power was not existent as a superpower, but it was on the rise up coming between the 10 kings. And then this is what you're going to see. And I considered the horn, and behold, there came up among another little horn, before whom there were 3 of the first horn plucked up before his root. This is what we're talking about here. They was plucked up by the Frank Empire, by the Gaul peoples, or when you hear them say Galatians, those were those type of peoples there. They was plucked up by those people. So it's that king that the papacy used, I believe, will pluck them up. And behold, the little horn, in this horn was eyes like a what? Eyes like eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth that spoke great things. And I think that was the rise of the paper power coming up. But I think that king there, from what I can understand, was that French king coming up, because now he was the one that he used, that because he said that he's going to honor the God of what? Forces. The paper power was always rising up on a force. Like the United States, they are connected to these forces here. And that would bring us up to the 10 kings. That will bring us the Brazilians coming in here. And now the paper tower, going to papal C, he's going to take his throne on 530 AD. And then he said he's going to be there for a time and a half a time, which 1,260 days. That's going to end in 1798. And that, my friend, is the end of what time, or when the time of the end and the time in a time what began. And this is what we say, because you're going to go to the book, he's going to say at some point this is going to happen in those times. And I will make it known to what would happen to I will make thee know, this is him talking to Daniel, what shall be in the last end of the end of the nation, for it is for at the time appointed the end shall what be. And this is the time appointed that I was talking about here. And so we're going to cut it there tonight. And I know I gave you a lot. We can talk and discuss and go from there. You can agree or disagree. But what you had pretty much from the time Antiochus, the little horn of Greek, goes into that temper. He started a lot of trouble. But what he did do, he changed the course of religion forever. And we always talk about what the paper power do, but this was the first start. After that, then the priesthood was destroyed. Every priest that they put on the throne after Ananias and Jason was illegitimate based on the Holy Scripture. It was not done by God. No high priest they put on the throne, even King Herod and all the folk that they had back then, was not Levites. And according to the Scripture, none of the stuff that they was doing was illegal, was legal or done towards the word covenant. And so when you start following what happened to Israel, you begin to understand he was just explaining to Daniel what was going to happen, what was the Grecian Empire was going to do to Israel, and how it was going to change the course of history. Most of that is written about that little horn there, and then it goes in to another king, and then you will see that's the latter part of that kingdom when that French king come in and he began to be swayed by the paper power and rise out. When you get into the book of Revelation, it's going to start right there about how Saul beast come up out of the sea, and this beast had the 7 heads, the 10 horns, and you're not going to see anything about the 11 beasts because the beast that have all this is the 11. He that's what he saw coming up by the sea. And that's what Revelation is going to start and going to take you into. He's going to explain in great detail about how Attila the Huns, the Vandals, and all those come in and was taken out. Right? All this started out with that French king coming on down through here. And so that's my dissertation for the night. This is Pastor Bergen from Lebanon Church, Waukegan. If you found this to be interesting, you can always go to our website at lebanonchurchwaukegan.org. Go to our live broadcast tab. Look up our Bible study tab. Click on it. You would have to sign up for our community of Bible study. Use a username and a password, and you will get access to a ton of free videos. You also get access to a live link where you can go live. May God bless each and every one of you. Thank you guys for attending.